Good morning, PBA. How are you this morning?
Good morning, how are you?
Morning.
I'm hoping we're going to get somewhere today because I feel like we've made a lot of movement in our proposals, probably not in all the areas you'd like, but I think in some that were more language than money, because the money is what it is. I mean, that's what's budgeted, so we're kind of stuck there. You have several different things that we handed you today. One is it says, it has a little TA at the top. These are all the items that neither party raised, the articles that nobody brought anything to the table to discuss. So if we could sign off on those, that would be great, because then we've at least gotten that out of the way.
I think we did open some of these articles though, like Article 3 and 6.
Okay, so, well, they're not the full articles, it's just the, let me see, like 3.1, 3.2, 3.3. I didn't think you had anything in that section. If you do, then let us know, because Darnice and I were tag teaming it, so if we miss something, it could be in both the TA and the other one, so we can take this apart if it's, you can agree to some but not the others. We just kind of wanted to, we do this with the other units, as we clean up, that way we keep track of everything, and at the end of the day, we don't have to sign everything. We've made some headway, and we can tell the board, and you can tell your membership, hey, we've been able to TA X number of sections.
Because I'd only really like to TA the articles if we TA the whole article.
Okay, that's fine, understood. The other thing we gave you was it's a one-page document, and these were some of the articles where you had questions of how much would it cost. So this gives you the article, what the deliverable or the subtask was that you were asking for, and what the estimated cost was, and then there's notes and comments that we got from staff about some of the things that you had asked for. But I'd like to go through our proposals first, if that's okay, because we're kind of limited in time today, and I'd like to go over those and then get to that spreadsheet with items on it later. So if you get to our proposal, if we go, the substantive starts on page 5. It's the non-discrimination, and you're right, here's Article 3, so we'll take that out of the TA. We actually added in, you had asked for similar language in 3.4 about being free from unnecessary or spiteful criticism or complaints. We did add this, we didn't have it from management, but from the chief. We feel when you say management, it spreads it out a little bit too far, and we don't want to be flooded with grievances because, a major or a lieutenant looked at somebody incorrectly or made some comment that we really, as the management, has no control over necessarily. So that was why we have it in here. You asked for it, and it's as for the chief of police. Okay? Then moving into Article 5, we left 5.3 the same. We have to have that language in there that it's in consultation with the school district, because when we do have an emergency, we cannot necessarily get a board meeting. And to have it at the sole discretion of the board meeting, that means we have to have all the board members show up for a meeting to discuss something, and if there's a riot, a civil disorder, we can't necessarily get the board together in order to make those decisions that need to be made. So we'd like it in consultation with, because what currently actually does occur is that the board members are each individually informed of the incident or the issues that are going on, so that they're informed, and then at the next board meeting, there's discussions if they have any issues with it. We would like to keep pandemic in there. There was a question this year from a couple of people of whether a pandemic constituted an emergency. And we believe very firmly that it does. We found out this year that it did. I mean, look at all that we had to do in order to pivot our work to comply with a virus. So we want to keep that in there. When we get to Article 6, union business, we added some of the language you wanted from in 6.3 about the bulletin boards. We added a lot of that language. The only thing I think that we left off is the idea that PBA would get to determine where the bulletin board gets placed. There are bulletin boards already up. We don't want to be having to have maintenance come in and start moving things around. We also have language in here about, you had they can't use the bulletin board for political endorsements, and we added or to further political agendas, because you could have, let's say you don't like board member Joan Smith, and Robert Brown is running against him, it wouldn't be an endorsement of Robert Brown, but you could put up something that John Smith is a horrible board member. And that wouldn't comply with, or wouldn't violate this endorsement, because you're not endorsing him. You're actually endorsing the other guy by putting something negative up. So we wanted to have, or to further any political agendas. It has to be, anything that's on the bulletin board has to be approved by the PBA president. I think you had that in yours. And we want it reviewed by the chief of police as well. And then, as you put, all costs would be associated with PBA. We kept in here about job vacancies. They're on the district website. We don't post job vacancies anywhere else but on the district websites now. Again, 6.5, we took out the designation of who was going to be at that meeting. The meeting is still there. It's limited. It doesn't need to be limited as to who is going to be there, because it depends on what the topic is on who we need to bring in. We added in, you wanted to be involved in new employee orientation. New employee orientation now is not a physical orientation. It is virtual. All the other units that have asked for something similar, what we've given them is embedded within the virtual NEO. They have a link to their website. So CTA, if you go into NEO, there's a link to CTA's website. It links right to a video that they have put together for themselves that explain why being a member of CTA is a good thing and why they need to be a member. So that's something you could do as well. We do like to have at least the opportunity to view it before we do the link, so that we're not linking it to something that would be inappropriate or could cause problems.
Is that just because of COVID that it's online?
No, it went online, when, Dr. LaCava, 3 years ago. NEO has been online for 3 years. It just helped, that way it allows new employees to do the training whenever they need to. They could do it at night, they could do it on the weekends, they don't have to physically come into the building to sit through the presentations. They can actually have all of that done, and they can pause it. Let's say I have an hour tonight to do NEO. I'll do it tonight, I'll do a little bit tomorrow, a little bit the next day, so that we track them going through the process, but it's all online. We agreed to a lot of your language here in 6.8 about that we would give you information. It is for proposal related to bargaining. It can't just be that we're going to give you anything and everything whenever you ask for it. It has to be related to bargaining. And we did add in here, you wanted the email addresses for names and names of employees. We can give you the dues-paying members for PBA. We cannot give it to you for everybody else. There's a public records issue with that. As you know, police officers exempt. Once we let that information out of the building, we can't bring it back. To protect the officers, we can't give you their locations. We can't give you their email addresses.
What if they give you the okay? When we're initiating an initial thing, would you like to give your information to the PBA?
I'm not sure how we could track that, but if you're asking them, they could just give it to you themselves.
I think their names are not exempted. I think their locations are, but I don't know. I would have to research that. I think I looked into it, and I think that the names and emails would be okay. It's just the exemption for their specific work location.
Well, we were advised not to provide that. We can give you dues-paying members, but we can't give it to any other officers.
Well, we already have that already. That's kind of I think defeats the purpose. When they sign up for the PBA, then they provide the information to
Our members' email.
our members.
Well, that proposal goes a lot further than just email and names of potential members. It talks about other items and agendas and things that you may need in order to create your proposals. So this is just our proposal. We have talked to our staff, and we've been advised that we can't provide that. If you find something else that says we can, if you could pass that along, I'll send it over to our legal team.
Okay.
The police officers' Bill of Rights, we still would like to get all of this language out of there. We've put in a hyperlink. You'll see that it's, well, if you have a color copy, it's in blue. So it would be hyperlinked on the page. When you look at the collective bargaining agreement, they would just click on the Bill of Rights, and it would take them right to Florida statutes. We've done that in other contracts as well, where we've hyperlinked it to a specific document or a statute so that they can see it, rather than reiterating it right here in the proposal when the law could change. This way, the language changes as the law does. Getting into Article 10, we really didn't make any changes to our previous proposal. In Article 12, we did add just in the title resignations and probation because it does address both. We still feel that the 2 weeks' notice is appropriate, and we're not inclined to decrease the probation from 18 months to 12.
10.2, you also have a change. This is the previous, but we don't have the previous proposal in front of us. We have this one. So can you tell us what the change was in 10.2?
Well, we gave you 10.2, this is the same proposal that I gave you last time. There's no change, there's nothing new on this
We don't
one.
have it in front, I don't have it in front of us.
You don't have Article 10 in front of you right now.
He's saying your last proposal. He was just
Okay.
wondering if there was a change.
Well, we gave everybody copies of it, so,
I have it.
okay, good. Then going into Article 17, we've looked at the total number of duty hours. It's 200 days plus 6 paid holidays, so it's 1648 hours, and that's inclusive of holidays. We'd like to change all these to hours within here. We did add in 17.1C. You had asked for language that it couldn't be arbitrary and capricious, so we've added that in 17C and D, so that when they are the use of comp time, and then also when they can use it, it can't be arbitrary and capricious. We did take out, we had previously taken out such hours are not limited to code 9004, and we took it out completely. What we should have done is take out the word not. So such hours are limited to code 9004. And the reason why we did this, we mentioned this before, is there were some officers who would be working a lease at a school site and tell the leasing coordinator, don't pay me, give me comp time for it. They would get comp time for that lease and then use the comp time or get the comp time paid out at their regular rate later on. And it was cost the department quite a bit of money to do that.
What do you all think of that?
There's no way presently that anybody would even reach that amount because there's virtually no 904 overtime. That's why years ago we fought against that to get it to include all overtime. So this is a big hit to our personnel right here. So I personally totally against it.
I have a comment also. Like I mentioned the last time, if the officer works over a lease, he's still filling out an overtime paperwork that the principal or whoever's running that lease at that school has to sign for the authorization to pay. Right? Whether they take it in comp or not, or they take it in pay, that's up to the officer. The district, the school police can still bill the school for the 8 hours or the 4 hours that the officer worked.
Right, at the rate for the lease. We can't bill it at the rate the officer is being paid. That's
Okay,
that's
but
the
what the
issue.
rate of the lease is always going to be higher than what the rate of the officer gets paid anyway. Because the lease rate now is what, 70, 60-something, $70 an hour? No officer in this department makes that much, so I don't understand what the holdup is. If the officer wants to take it in comp, the department still has the option of billing the school. If they choose not to bill the school, it's on the department, it's not on the officer. So,
I understand your point.
a management issue that needs to be.
I've been given different directions, so this is the proposal that we have today.
Okay.
Going further into 17.3, we added the language that you had asked for about that this doesn't limit or alter the required notice for involuntary transfers as provided in 8.1. We are fine with that. The other changes are the same. We haven't done anything different. 17.10, we did change the proposal to be more aligned with what you had asked for. One of the things we wanted to point out by offering it to, you had wanted in their sectors. We did not include sectors. It first goes to the zone and non-school-based assignments and then district-wide. And the reason why, there are 3 sectors that have no high schools. So if it went to a sector first, it would end up excluding people. We didn't want that. And then the non-school-based assignments are people like a K-9 unit or, that are the detectives that may want to be able to do that overtime as well, that they aren't assigned necessarily to a particular school. So we wanted them to be included, but we did make that change to be more aligned with what you had asked for.
I think this is the one where you all just did the new general order, right? That's for that.
Still contrary to the operation order. What you're indicating there is contrary to the operation order where we had a discussion with previous Chief Kitzrow to be able to allocate it in a fair and equitable manner, and this is not fair and equitable for the officers in the sector. What sense does it make, for example, at me at Jupiter, have a football game where I have officers who work in my vicinity who have been there for a while, who have parents who have children going through those schools, and those kids end up in my school, not work a game, or they get precluded from doing so because I have to put it out to everybody. It does not make any sense.
You don't put it out to everybody first. It goes to the zone
That
first.
is,
So
the
it's not
zone-
going to the
I-
sector, it's
I
going to the
understand
zone,
this.
and then district-wide.
I fully understand this. I've been doing this in high school for 13 years. The zone is comprised of a lot of people. There are a lot of people who don't even know how to get to my school. There are people who never put one foot on my school grounds. So why am I going to have to give it to them over someone who has been at my school, who is familiar with the community, who is familiar with the students, who is familiar with my staff? It doesn't make any sense, and it's totally ridiculous.
Well, the general order does have sector, right? Sector
Yes,
zone.
and it's contrary to the own department order.
Well, we met with Chief Alexander prior to bringing these proposals to you today, and these have been approved by management.
He approved all of them.
Yes.
So is he aware that this is contrary to his own department order?
I don't know that.
Maybe he should be aware of that.
Well, I'm sure he will be after this meeting. So we'll let him know that there's, because he
We
may
already-
need to change the general order then.
Also-
We appreciate your proposal, but totally against it.
Also, the second part of it now contradicts that seniority wheel that we're trying to get the language back in, the language that should have never been taken out in the first place. So that contradicts that seniority wheel,
The non-school-based assignment.
of course.
So you wanted to exclude anybody that's like K-9 or detectives, they would be excluded?
They'd go under the seniority wheel, and they'd get their overtime that way, if it's
Well,
non-school-based.
It didn't seem like it, because from what you're telling me, you'd have to go sector, zone, then district-wide, and then they'd be eligible under the seniority wheel for district-wide. Because as Officer O'Sullivan just explained it to me, it would have to be your school, your sector, then your zone, then it goes district-wide where the seniority wheel would kick in.
This is
The
for
sector
Okay, so we're
zone
talking about
involved.
the other people.
school-based overtime that I'm referring to.
Well,
This
then why is Officer Lopez bringing up the seniority wheel and saying
because
it violates the
I'll
seniority
explain
wheel
that
if
to
it
you.
doesn't?
Because that was our rationale. We were the ones who came up with that with then Chief Leon. His theory of that, what Alex is referring to, is the following, is that years ago, there was quite a bit of 9,004 overtime. There was quite a bit. That's department overtime. So the fair and equitable way of doing so was doing so by seniority. And what we had is that it was in a book, and they went straight by seniority. So if they needed 5 officers, and the first 2 guys took it, the third didn't, the fourth didn't take it, and so on, so they filled it with those 5 people at first, senior people. Then what happened when the next detail came up, if number 3 and 4 didn't want it initially, they had the opportunity. So it's 2 separate and distinct things here that we're speaking about, okay? The school-based overtime, because of the fact that officers are assigned and the department created sectors which are so small in nature that only 3 out of, how many sectors we have? 40? Because of 3 sectors are all comprised of, don't have a high school, that to change everything for 3 sectors, which is 21 officers, and completing sergeant, 24 people, to affect the other 280 makes absolutely no sense. It's asinine. It's crazy. And because of the fact, the reason behind it is keeping it in the sector again is for familiarity for the parents, the staff, the students. Because when they come through there, they're going to know the officers, and they go through the elementary school, the middle school, and then ultimately to me at the high school. So this makes absolutely no sense.
Well, I appreciate your input.
We could also probably, if to include those in those sectors, if we needed to, we could also probably break it down and say, okay, you 3 guys, and I'm just using numbers, I don't know exactly, you 3 guys are now in this sector, you 3 guys are in this sector. If we want to break it down, that would make the whole thing a lot easier, and then you don't have to change anything.
Well, I appreciate your input. This is our proposal.
Okay.
So going into 18.1 leaves of absences, in Article, it's 18.2, paid leaves, in B and sick leave, what we've done, and you'll see it in a couple of places, we just converted the hours, the days to hours. So you get credit with 4 days. It's actually 32 hours for everybody. It's not, if you look at your payroll stub, like your sick leave is not in days, it's in hours. So we were trying to make that clarification since we're moving towards an hour basis for employment. So that's with all those hours. And, excuse me. In 3, there was a proposal that you had where you talked about, it has these pregnancy, miscarriage, abortion, childbirth, or recovery therefrom. And I took out the disability caused by, because it's not a disability, it's a health condition. So I want to take that out. I don't want any confusion for ADA purposes that somehow these are now disabilities. We don't consider them to be disabilities unless there's more information there. And then you had added a separate sentence whenever we talked about this, like in such sick leave be insufficient personal leave provisions may be used for pregnancy, and you had and other related conditions. If you look at the sentence right before that, they had at the end of that where they listed all of those conditions, which shall hereafter be referred to as pregnancy. So we just put quotes around pregnancy in that sentence, so that it's understood anywhere else where pregnancy is used in that sentence, that's what it's referring to, is all those conditions.
Okay, we could possibly add that to the definition section too, if that makes sense.
Well, I don't think it's necessary, because definitions are for terms that are used throughout the contract. This is only used in this one paragraph.
I think that there's been issues though with people going on pregnancy leave and things like that, so, and the definition of what's related to that, so I think that's maybe why we added language.
Well, if there have been issues with people going on pregnancy leave, I think you're talking a broader term, because what you're looking at, the questions I've heard are more aligned with the Americans with Disabilities Act, and I'm not inclined to start putting ADA-type language in a contract where it's not appropriate. But we can continue talking about it. I did add in there, as you suggested, the when possible for when they have the duty to inform. It did make sense because we have had people go into preterm labor. You can't give at least a 1 month if you go into labor early. So we put that language in there. Again, when you get onto page 19, we're just converting the 30 work days into 240 hours. We have that listed there. And in paragraph 9, we added in the language that you asked for, that any use of sick leave for which a doctor's note is provided shall not be considered as a violation of any sick leave policy. That makes sense, so we added that in there as you requested. We didn't make any other changes that we haven't discussed with you. Obviously, and on page 23, it's the illness, injury or illness in line of duty leave. In paragraph 2, we just changed the word inoculations to vaccinations. The word inoculations isn't really used anymore.
I'm sorry, where are you reading?
On page 23,
Okay.
that's more the current terminology.
Okay.
The rest of the changes are just taking out principal, adding a D instead of an S for entitles. It should be entitled in bereavement leave. We simply cannot agree to extend bereavement leave beyond the 3 days. It's a costly proposition, and we cannot do that at this time. So moving on to 18.3, the unpaid leaves for personal leave, that's the same change. We didn't change anything from the last proposal, but we do have something new for you on page 28. We still took out the dual career ladder. And here's why. If you look into the master police officer, we've added that. That will be the new 20.1. We're going to take the money that's in the pay for performance and the money that's in the career change ladder, because pay for performance is $100,000. Career change is about $200,000. We're going to take that money and put it into the master police officer program. So it would be a $300,000 program. We're still working on what that max amount was. We want them to have a share of all the officers that are in there, but we need to have a max amount, because if there were only 3 master officers and there's $300,000 sitting in the pool, we can't give 3 officers each $100,000. So we're working on what that number would be. It'd probably be the midpoint between the positions. so that it would make them more akin to upper level, but not quite there. And we also added in here that it's not cumulative. It's awarded on a yearly basis. It's a one-time payment, and it would be in June. We have certain considerations to get this master police officer. And we took a lot of this, that was what was in the sergeants. They have to have 5 years of continuous service within the department. They have to have 60 credit hours from an accredited college or university, no formal discipline issued within the past 5 years, and a satisfactory rating in all evaluation categories for the current and the prior year.
You said you took criteria from the sergeant
We
assignment?
took some of that language from the sergeants, so we'll get into sergeants in a minute, because we've made some changes with that as well. But that was some of the language in there, that they had to have these things to be sergeants, so we aligned it with that. That it's the designations at the discretion of the chief, but it won't be made in an arbitrary and capricious manner. Again, the budget amount is $300,000.
So this is from the performance-based pay plan? That's
We're
what you-
taking the money for, the career ladder is $200,000, that's about what that costs. The pay for performance is 100. We're going to take those two amounts, put them together to create a $300,000 program for the officers. The supplement's paid in the last paycheck of June of any given year, and the designated officer must be an employee of the district as of June 15th in order to be eligible to receive the funds. So if they retired on June 1st, they would not be eligible. They'd have to be there June 15th. It would be paid out in the last check of the school year. And any officer who's the subject of a criminal and/or internal affairs investigation by the district or other official investigative agencies that would or did result in the employee receiving formal discipline or being removed from his or her regular school year assignment shall immediately forfeit the designation of master officer. And this consideration is done on a yearly basis. Again, it is a supplement that's paid once a year. It's non-cumulative, so it's not like it gets added to your base pay. It's just, you're a master officer this year, you're going to get this amount of money. And as I said, we're still working on what that max amount would be. So if you have any suggestions, that would be great. We can put that, we can certainly consider that.
So this is not retirement-based then?
What do you
It's
mean
not-
by retirement-based?
It's not included in your base pay.
Yeah, it's not, so it's not included, and you could be, it's year to year, you're subject to,
Correct.
and so 60 credit hours, I mean, and just to throw something else, and if you were in the military for 4 years, wouldn't be the same if we're going to start changing things around, add something to that effect, to instead of 60 credit hours?
I mean, that's something we consider. If you want to bring that as a proposal, we could certainly consider it.
But, so now, no.
What is what is the push to get rid of the career ladder? And, what is the reasoning behind
Well,
that?
the one thing is, we're not sure that the career ladder is doing what it was meant to do. We feel that the master officer designation rewards officers who, one, have longevity in the department. It also rewards officers who are performing well, who serve the community well, who serve the students well. We felt that this was a better way of rewarding, and I hate to use the word good behavior because it sounds like you're children and you're not, but it's a way of rewarding great work and great efforts within the community and great personal communications with the children and with the staff and with the school sites.
And the same reasoning with the performance-based?
Correct. Now, we've heard complaints from your officers at the bargaining table before about pay for performance, that the evaluations are, as they were telling us, they were rigged, so that some people, if you didn't like me and you didn't want me to get, and you guys have that number that you use for pay for performance, I can't ever remember what it is, but you want that money, that pay for performance. If your supervisor doesn't like you for a personal reason, they can rig it so you don't get it. This is really at the chief's discretion. It's based on those criteria. As long as you've got a good evaluation, you're satisfactory, you don't have any discipline, you've got the college credits, and you've been with the district for more than 5 years, for continuous 5 years, you're eligible for this money every single year. So as long as your performance stays the same, I don't see any reason why you would not be getting it.
So this is going to increase then to 300,000 every year?
Right now, it's 300,000. That is
It
what
would
we're,
have to increase, is what I'm saying. If
Not
we're gonna put a-
necessarily.
We're going to put a percentage on it, though. Wouldn't it have to increase?
no, this is the amount that's being budgeted and put into the budgets. So right now, that's the amount that's budgeted. We are not looking to necessarily increase it every year because we may not be able to increase it every year. It's like the pay for performance has been 200,000, it's been 100,000 for years.
Sure. But
Right?
then
So
we
that
also
hasn't
had
changed.
We also had the career ladder then. So now we're taking away the career ladder, adding the two together, and we don't have, so you're changing overtime, you're changing everything completely now on somebody's paycheck.
Well, we don't see it that way. We feel that this is a reaction. You guys wanted the master officer program. This is the criteria under which we want to have a master officer program.
Okay, but what I'm saying though, I understand that, but you don't see that it's going to change your pay?
It changes how much you take home at the end of the year, absolutely.
That's what I'm saying though. So then it does change your pay, then you do agree to that.
Does not change your base pay, no. There are different
And then ask you
components to base
It
pay.
can change your base pay because you're going from a guy who can get a chance for 5%, say, or whatever, what is it, 4%?
4%.
And all of a sudden, now he's not going to get that 4% every year on his base pay.
It's a
He
salary.
doesn't keep it anymore. Once
Yeah,
you
and
got
there's a
it,
key,
you
so
got
now
it.
it's we'll flip a coin this year, okay, you know what, we're going right back to the same thing of being able to make if I don't like you, I don't have to give you a good,
It's the same
It's
concern.
the
the
same
same
thing.
principle, you're just
All right.
changing the word.
Well, and I hear all your complaints, I hear it.
No,
You know, this is our proposal.
I
You
just-
had master officer in yours, as well as a lot of other monetary
Ours
asks.
was just a $2,000,
Yeah,
Right, well, this right here could be more than $2,000.
yeah, but
but it's axing
For
to
maybe
other-
one time, though.
I can't hear you when you're all speaking at once, so if you could speak once at a time, I'd appreciate it.
It's just axing two other programs at the expense
you
versus
combine it in
our
one.
proposal was a $2,000 supplement that was, I think, Chief Kitchero's idea,
yes.
so.
Well, if that's how you perceive it, I can't change that. What we're telling you is we're creating a new program based on suggestions made by the officers that they wanted this master officer program. This is how we're going to fund it. I don't understand the logic. We've explained to you the budgetary outlook that we have of why you think this is an open pot of money that just keeps growing every year. It doesn't occur that way. We have 6,000 students we may not get back next year. We're going to be lucky if everybody maintains their jobs. We're going through budget review right now, and every department had to cut 5%. Departments that didn't need to lose people are having to lose positions, vacant positions, that we're not going to be able to backfill. So the idea that we have all this money to throw into a contract is in the words of Mr. O'Sullivan, asinine,
And
because
then-
it just doesn't make sense.
Well, also, I'm concerned with this F that says if you receive any formal discipline, then
formal.
you'll just be forfeited from the designation. I mean,
Well, if you
what
have
is
a
that?
better way of looking at it, let us know. But if we have an officer who's designated as a master police officer who is accused of soliciting a student for sex and is now under
Well,
just
that's
a
not in
hold
here.
on, under a criminal investigation and an IA, and maybe they end up, because maybe it wasn't what they thought it was, but it's still enough to give them a written reprimand for the comments they made to the student, we do not want that officer having the master officer designation, and I wouldn't think that your unit would either.
Well, that's a
Because that
very-
shows that the officer is a high-standing member doing exemplary service. And so if they're getting formal discipline, they're not giving exemplary service.
Well, that's a very extreme example. and
It
this
is an extreme
language
example,
is-
but that's what we
I'm
have to
sorry.
build the contracts for.
Okay. That's a very extreme example, and I mean, this includes criminal and/or an internal affairs investigation. To receive any formal discipline, that could be a large array of things, so.
Sure.
So what are you concerned about, that you think an officer should be allowed to commit some type of crime that would not keep them from being a master officer?
Well, it doesn't just include crimes, it includes any internal affairs investigation that could result in
That
a
could be
written
unfounded,
reprimand.
too. on
Right,
top of
but that could result, or that would or did result in them receiving formal discipline or being removed. Again, this is our proposal. If you want to provide something that's different, or you want to change it in some way, that's what negotiations are about.
And we're just asking a pointed question, maybe I can direct it to the chief. All right? I did the same job you did back home. What do you, in this department, use as a definition of what formal discipline is?
Well, we have formal discipline in our GOs already.
Right, for our membership, what are you saying as a representative of this department? What is the definition of a formal discipline? Is it,
I'm going to go back to the GO and say that is our formal discipline process.
right, so
Subjective.
We also have progressive discipline is listed in the contract.
I fully understand that, maybe I'm not
So
getting
what
my point
exactly
across.
are you thinking is formal discipline that isn't in the contract?
It includes a written reprimand.
Yeah,
Well, yes, that's progressive discipline. It's in the contract as formal discipline.
So if you get any written reprimand, you're forfeited from the master officer
Yes.
program?
Uh,
Okay.
okay, that's what we wanted.
Written reprimands aren't grievable, so it's pretty much, everything gets a written reprimand, and gets put in your file, because the department knows it's not grievable. So this is just another way to cut out
Well, I hate that you have so
Inappropriate.
little faith in the management
I-
that
I
it
would-
feels like that in your opinion that the district is constantly trying to steal money out of your pocket, and that is not the intent. The intent of this program is to actually put money in the pockets of our officers.
Well, you're not putting money in our
And to put
pockets, you're
more-
just shuffling the money from our right pocket to our left pocket. So let's get that straight, you're not putting extra money
That
in our
is
pocket.
your belief, Officer Lopez.
Well, when you're taking away two other things that are saying it equivalents to what this is, you're taking away the money from the right hand, and you're putting it into the left hand, and you're saying, we want to give you this. This is going to give you more money. It's not going to give us more money.
If one's
Let's-
pensionable
let's
and
not
the other one's
sugarcoat
not
it.
pensionable, you're right there, he's taking money out of the pocket too. So I mean, if we want to say, hey, you know, this is apples and these are oranges, I mean, it is what it is. If
And
you
again-
don't agree with that, that's taking
No, I
money out-
don't. But what we can do is, we've taken your comments into consideration. We're more than happy to get a counter proposal from you.
And I don't mean to sound condescending, I'm going to simplify this. Under the current career ladder program, an officer there achieves each level, and they get to an equivalent of a 4% raise. That is with them forever and ever, amen, as long as they're here. It increases their hourly wage. It increases their overtime. It increases their pension, right? And they do that by putting in hard work on their own time to achieve it, and it's not taken away from them. This is very selective. It can be taken away at any time. That cannot be. So therefore, it's a major hit financially to our officers. And there's no disputing that.
Again, this
Is
is
that
our,
taking money away or not?
It is.
Is it taking money away or not? It's a simple question.
it depends on the officer now, doesn't it? It depends on the officer and where they are in the career ladder, whether they're on the career ladder. This is rewarding behavior for the officers on the job here at the district. This is our proposal. We're welcome to hear counter proposals if you'd like. And you don't need to dumb things down for me, Officer Sullivan. I'm fully aware of the contract.
So then therefore, you should be admitting that it is taking money out of our officers' hand, not dumbing it down. It's just like when I'm talking about the overtime allocation, I'm talking to people who have never done it before, so I simplified it so it's an understanding. Also, the officers who are currently receiving these career ladder monies, what happens to the monies that they already have in their pocket if we agree on this program?
If it's part of their base salary, we're not taking money out of their base salary. And according to you, they've already gotten it. It is in their salaries now. It will stay in their salaries. We're not going to be taking money away from officers. So moving on, 20.2, we put it back in. We had taken out the salary incentive money. We put it back in at your request. So 20.2 is back in the contract. Moving on to 20.3, again, we still have the take-home vehicle excluded from the sergeants because almost everybody has a take-home vehicle now. This was back to when only sergeants had take-home vehicles and not even all of them, and that was only those who had the take-home vehicle, so we removed that language. We still took out the per dog. We've changed the crisis response team to the emergency service unit. And then we added this language, if you see there's an asterisk by the $2,800 for the caretaker handler. We've added that language in there. It's longer than I'd like it to be, but it's basically grandfathering those people in who currently have 2 dogs. We grandfather them in. For as long as they have the 2 dogs, they will continue to receive the supplement per dog. What this does is that if the dog passed away or they gave the dog to somebody else, they would go back to just the one dog and could never go back to having two. So that's what that grandfather language has. It's very similar if you look into the SAAU contract. We had a Glade supplement. There was like a travel pay supplement that they used to give to bus drivers to travel from the Glades to the coast. And that we had this similar language in there. It's grandfathering those in who have it, but eliminating it by attrition.
Okay. And I talked to some of the members of the K-9, and they brought to my attention the Garcia case, which I guess is, if you're a K-9 officer, you're entitled to 3 to 5 hours a week in overtime for the at-home care of your dogs. So I think that would result in an increase in the $2,800 supplement that they're now
Well, I'd
getting.
appreciate if you pass that case along to me.
Okay.
Because I think I would be interested to see it because we have negotiated in here the $2,800 in lieu of any other payments. So it may be different and distinguishable from that case for that reason. So I'd like to see that.
Okay, sure, I'll follow up with you.
We continue to take out the 20.5, the non-contract rate. We want to go to just straight time and overtime for all officers. There's been a lot of issues with maintaining the integrity of that system and making sure that people are paid appropriately. It makes more sense to have them at straight and overtime. The salary adjustment is still the 2.5 to the minimum and 3.5 to the max, with 3.5 to all officers. This is what has been budgeted. And all the other units have Me Too provisions in it. We simply cannot increase the amount of money we're giving the officers, because if we do that, we are going to have to reopen with all our other units, and we do not have the money to do that. This is what was budgeted for your department starting in January. If you want to take that money and move it around and do something different with it, like we've done in the past, I'm not sure how we'd be able to do that based on the numbers of your department now. What we did before, we were able to reward longer-term officers with a higher rate of increase, only because there were so few new officers. Now, I think the new officers outnumber the veteran officers, and we can't do something like that now with any integrity. Performance-based pay is still taken out. When you get to 20.8, the payroll schedule, the idea of moving from 26 pays to 22 requires reprogramming of PeopleSoft. There's no interest in doing that right now. We understand why you would want it, but at this point, we're not able to do that or willing to do that massive overhaul to PeopleSoft that would be required to change that for your officers.
Did the other employees still have the opportunity to do just a half the year or whatever they do, and then during the time off, they don't get paid during those times? So
No,
they-
we had that in the SEIU. It's called positive pay, so there's no smoothing of the pay. That they were going to be paid for all hours worked at the time they were worked, rather than smoothing it out. And it did not go smoothly. It turned out there were only 5 in that unit who really wanted it, and so we negotiated it back out.
And the teachers don't have,
The teachers do not have that. They have a 22 pay and a 26 pay option that is within the teacher
that's what I'm
contract.
saying, though. They do have the two different pays.
Correct,
Yeah.
teachers do. It's programmed for the teachers. In order to do it for you, we would have to do additional programming for PeopleSoft for it to work for your employee group.
But there is a way of doing it, so we can't do it because we're worrying about it taking up, or being a problem? So we always go back to everybody else's contract. Well, if they have it in their contract, why can't we have
Correct,
it in
because when PeopleSoft, that has been in their contract for probably 15, 20 years. When PeopleSoft was implemented originally, it was programmed into the system for that to work. We will have to reprogram PeopleSoft in order to do that for your unit.
Okay, that's what we're asking for.
Right, and the answer to that at this time is no.
Why, how much would that cost?
We gave you the sheet. It's not a cost factor, it's staff time. We are not going into how many hours of staff time it would require, plus all the issues with possible overpayments and delayed payments. If Mr. Burke has something else to add, he certainly
Say
can.
the PBA payroll is complicated. You know, teachers don't earn overtime. You guys have overtime, a variety of different ways to get paid. The time and labor within PeopleSoft is pretty complicated. When we went to PeopleSoft in 2006, you may recall we had some issues with payroll. We spent a lot of time and effort into cleaning that up and getting it stabilized. So we don't take it lightly to go in and start adjusting those payroll rules. So if we're going to do that, it's going to be, it doesn't happen overnight. It would be like probably a 2-year project to make sure we do it correctly and not cause any inaccuracies in the payroll.
Okay, we'll talk about it.
Okay. So in 20.11, we've made some big progress there with the sergeants. We're leaving that back in. We're going to have after January 1, 2021, that these rules would apply so that any officer who currently has it under the old rules will still be listed as a sergeant. We've taken out the 5 years of continuous law enforcement service, that it has to be with the district. It doesn't have to be. It can be 5 years of continuous law enforcement service, period. We've taken out any references to the exam. We're not going to do an exam. It will be an interview, just like for any other position. There's no record of formal discipline, so it had before no record of discipline. We didn't want it to be anybody to consider that maybe they just got a conference note or a memo that didn't rise to the level of formal discipline, for anybody to think that that would exclude them. This has to be formal discipline, and by that I mean anything that's in the progressive discipline section of the contract.
So so then that's different than the master police?
Yes,
So you can be a sergeant, but you can't be a master police?
it's quite possible, yes. So we would remove the language about this line supervision course. We talked to the chief. There's no definition of what that means, or who provides that training, how they get it, when they had to have had it. We just felt that it was unnecessary. We took out in this one that they have to have the 60 semester hours of college or an associate's degree. You have to have it for a master's officer, but now you will not have to have it for sergeant. We've also removed the,
So what's the difference, let me ask the chief, so you're saying that a master police officer should have more
Education.
education and
Yeah.
credits and be more, have more experience than a sergeant?
Yeah, I think the intended goal here is that over time, we elevate the status of all the employees, and we don't want to adversely impact current sergeants or other short-term opportunities for your membership.
Well, our current sergeants already have those criteria.
Not all of them.
Our current sergeants
Our sergeants.
have that criteria
We
already.
reviewed this, and not all of them.
Mike, now.
Okay. All right.
But don't we want the most qualified people to be supervisors?
Of course we do. And
But
it comes
this
down
is-
to how we define the qualifications.
right, just like Mr. Lynch, Officer Lynch mentioned, that
doing
you
the
would have, you could have military service in lieu of college. You mentioned that. So it's the same argument here. So you may not have to have an associate's degree, but you were 5 years in the NYPD as a supervisor.
Yeah, I don't have
That
a problem
should,
with
that should,
Yeah, I
that
don't
should
have a problem with
qualify.
that At all. I agree with that, actually. I don't have a problem with that type of issue.
It's the examination, that's what I meant.
Yes.
All right,
That's
so
how you get
the
the most qualified
examination the examination is a cost, that there is a cost associated
Right.
with that. And I don't know how much clearer we can be about our budgetary situation that has not improved over the last probably 10 years. It's not getting any better. I don't anticipate, unless the legislature in Tallahassee changes, that it's going to get any better. We need to find ways to save money here and there. This examination, we felt, was not necessary. We could do a formal interview process, and that would be sufficient,
How would the interview process take place?
just like any other interview.
How would that work?
Well, if you look, I'm assuming you've been to an interview before, that
Well, I
you've
mean,
you've
is it a
applied
panel?
you've applied
Who's
for the
on the
special
panel?
assignment. It's not a promotion, it's a special assignment. It's a special duty assignment, so they would apply, and then there would be interviews when there are positions available, just like for any other special assignment or duties. I'm not
basically
sure
it's a
what you
tap on
mean
the
by,
shoulder.
Who's on the interview board now, or is it just the chief?
There is no board. It's eeny, meeny, miny, no.
This is taking away a legitimate process that is used in professional police organizations and just basically could be put down to, and anybody could say it doesn't happen, but it's a reality. It can go down to politics, who you like and who you don't. That's the problem when you become the supervision problems.
The
Because
different-
how is an officer who's come from a professional police organization coming in and saying, oh, let me see how I become a sergeant? Oh, geez, if they like me.
I think that shows the confusion, Officer Sullivan. You just eliminated it for me. A sergeant is not a promotion. It is a special duty assignment, just like a K-9, just like this master officer we're talking about. In our unit at the School District of Palm Beach County, it is not a promotion. It is a special duty assignment. It says it right in the title.
I understand
Having
that.
all of these steps in here leads people to believe erroneously that this is a promotion, and it's not. So if we could go on, it has this, like the selection process, some of the regulations have been removed. It says at the top of page 36 that the interview panel is comprised of the department command officers selected by the chief and at least one non-district law enforcement personnel selected by the chief of police. That's what's currently in there. That's what's going to remain. We left some of the information in here about the last two bullet point on the other regulations that were there. We took out the other ones because it's dealing with, if they're candidates, they can withdraw their candidacy. We're not going to have the examination, so there's not the pool that would have occurred previously, so we took this out. We also removed the language at the bottom that said, "and the take-home vehicle." We took that language out because, again, it's not just sergeants who have take-home vehicles. Moving on to Article 22, 22.2, we took out that language about
Well, if I
training
could
and
just
aids.
ask, who's on the interview panel now?
It is comprised of a command officer selected by the chief, and I would imagine it changes from interview to interview, depending upon maybe who's available or what the specialty that they're looking for is. A non-district law enforcement personnel that's selected by the police chief.
And it's the same practice that we've been using for lieutenant and for major and for captain.
So who sat on the last one?
We'd have to look at the records because it varies depending on criteria such as availability.
Our proposal for the grievance procedure remains the same. We would like to make these changes. It actually creates more steps for the officers, more opportunities to have it resolved at a lower level. We feel that that would be a good step in the right direction.
This is the same.
It's the same as last time. And in progressive discipline, I read your proposal and you said we're objecting to the idea of just cause being removed. Just cause wasn't being removed. If you look in paragraph 8, there's two sentences that said the exact same thing. So this time I just took out the second sentence rather than the first. Because it had, with the discipline, dismissal, demotion, suspension of any employee shall be for just cause. The second sentence says, where just cause warrants, such actions as employee may be demoted, suspended, or dismissed. It's the same exact sentence. We were not removing just cause. We have no intention of doing that. I'm not even sure that would be legal. So we left that in. We now took out the second sentence and revised it, so it's just not saying the same thing twice. Recommendations for such action shall be made by the chief of police to the superintendent, because that's the process we have. I wanted to make that clear. We never suggested taking out just cause. We just were taking out one sentence because two sentences said the same thing.
So we have this thing now, it's called a supervisory review. How did, Chief, can you explain that to me real quick? Because we have had some questions in regards to that too on this, just recently from our members.
So what's your question?
The question is when a complaint comes in, who reviews it?
It goes to the police administration professional standards and it's reviewed.
So then why, if they determine that it doesn't need to be reviewed, then why does it go down to a supervisor to do a review? Isn't that kind of contradictory?
Yeah, I'm going to have to get back to you on that. I have to review the whole thing to give you a comprehensive answer.
And I can tell you, and I don't know exactly why they do, but I can tell you in my own shop, because I handle professional standards for the rest of the district, just not police officers. So I may get a police report where it's unsubstantiated or unfounded even. But in looking at the report, I still send it to the supervisor because additional training may be needed. So that the officer or the employee, in this case, let's say it's a teacher, doesn't put themselves in the position to be accused of it again. So there may be some accusation, and in reading the report, in my review of it for professional standards purposes, I look at it and go, you know what, they didn't do it, but they put themselves in such a position that these accusations could occur again. So I send it to the supervisor for them to review with the employee to just go, okay, in the future, if you're meeting with one student by yourself, make sure the door is left open, or make sure this is done, or make sure this is done, or let me get you the vitals training so
But as a
that,
civilian employee, you don't have the chance of having double jeopardy. We do.
No, we have, we,
Okay, but we have a policeman's bill of rights. There's a that's the
Correct.
reason I'm asking this. Now, and this is not a knock on you, chief, because we don't know the answer to it either. If he doesn't have a clear thing, how is a brand-new guy that's down on this level, like myself, supposed to know? So we get something that's sent up to a boss upstairs in administration, they're gonna look at it, and they're gonna determine, okay, one way or the other goes downstairs. Now this officer's being interviewed by a supervisor, where it can turn into an internal affairs. Now, if he gives a statement, that just ruins his whole policeman's, takes his rights away from him.
well, as the chief said, he's going to get back to you on that. I was just providing context for
just-
what we
yes,
do for everybody else, because there are reasons
But
to
there's
look
we're
at it
different
again.
than everybody else in this particular category also.
And I understand that. I was just providing some context.
And if the objective is to prevent future instances of the complaint, that's a good goal.
But see, now we're going, this is where I'm getting back on well, no, getting a formal complaint against you. Now, all of a sudden, you lose your.
No, it's not a formal complaint, it's formal discipline.
Okay, formal discipline. See, again, it could be a written thing and said, I know for one particular case, it said, unfounded, but review this.
Right, that's not formal discipline.
It is a sense of formal
It
discipline.
is not formal discipline. Let me go in here and look on page
Written
43 of our proposal. We have progressive discipline.
reprimand.
Here's formal discipline, just to be clear. The first step right now you have is a verbal warning with written notation. The second step that you have is a written warning. We'd like to eliminate that because it doesn't make sense. It seems to be the same thing over again. Then you have a written reprimand, suspension with or without pay with board approval, and dismissal with board approval. That's formal discipline. A memo that says, hey, in the future, you might want not to do this is not, I would not consider that a verbal warning with written notation.
But in a traditional agent or whatever, going back to, if we want to simplify things, to make things so it doesn't get to that point, our immediate supervisors would handle the complaint. That's what it would be directed to. It would go directly to Sergeant O'Sullivan. Okay, we got this complaint, handle it. It wouldn't go to anybody else. He'd handle it. He'd go, okay, either it goes from here, I can squash it at this level here, or it goes to the next level up.
See, I'm a little confused because you just said you didn't want a brand-new supervisor being the one to make that decision, but you said that that's what we should be doing, is giving it to the supervisor. Did I miss something?
Did I say that?
Yeah, you said that,
I never said I didn't want a brand-new supervisor. Never words came out of my mouth.
okay, that's what I heard, but okay.
It didn't come out of my mouth, and if it doesn't, but if they're put in that position to be a supervisor, that's what their job is. Regardless if we like it or not, if they're in that position as a supervisor, that's what their job is to handle that first-line discipline.
Right, and I'm sure the chief will get you a much better explanation than mine. I can only give you what the civilian, as you say, the other employee units on how we handle our business. And a lot of the complaints will come to me just because of the nature of the complaint, or that all police cases that you guys do on teachers all come over my desk for administrative review, every single one of them, except for police officers. So, and I look at some of them are just unfounded. If they're unfounded, I generally don't send them back to the supervisor unless there's an opportunity to learn. That we can take what the complaint was, even though it was unfounded, just like I said, to help the officer learn, or the employee to learn better techniques for handling certain things.
Do you send it back with a suggestion, like,
Yes,
the suggestion would be like to?
More training needed.
More training, yeah, okay.
yes. So I do send it back. I send it to it goes through my HR manager to the supervisor, and I will put a suggestion to my HR manager, talk to the principal about having this person get vitals training or, restraint techniques training, so we don't run into this again.
Just a question about, which I just spoke with Ms. Mendoza about. It's kind of like an oxymoron. I never understood this. A, verbal warning, written notation. That takes a tool out of a toolbox from a supervisor. So, Johnny, don't do that. Or Officer Johnny, don't do that. That's between the sergeant and the officer. He or the supervisor is addressing something at the level that is just between the sergeant and the officer. It could be something as minor as whatever, you didn't button your shirt.
It doesn't take it out, just hold on a second, it doesn't take it out of the toolbox. Because we still have principals, if you look at the teacher bargaining unit, they have a verbal reprimand with written notation, written reprimand, suspension, termination. Those are the 4 steps of progressive discipline. We still have memos and conference notes where they're directives, where it's and it is, we call it verbal coaching. Like, hey, Johnny, don't do that again. because this is going to get you in trouble. If you do it again, we usually have them put it in a memo, so it's in writing, so the employee gets it, and it's a directive. It's like, you, from this point forward, you know, you have to do this. Hold on a second.
You interrupted me.
I'm sorry, I'll let you finish. I thought you were proceeding on an
No,
erroneous
I
assumption,
just
and I
don't
didn't want you.
understand the logic of this, and we're coming from two different perspectives here, okay? We're coming from law enforcement side and the civilian side. That's where sometimes it clicks, and I don't mean that to be disrespectful. I'm coming from someone who's in charge in New York. There are more people on this police department. I never understand why this is taking, and Chief, you should understand this is taking a tool away from the sergeant. So if Johnny does something wrong, and we have many supervisors here who are wet behind the ears, they are not going to know that they could still have their own little notepad, but I'm sure you did back home, and you're writing your little notes for the officers that you have. Why is it have to be a verbal warning with written notation? That is, in our officers' thing, that is punitive. My name is on a piece of paper, where if the sergeant just told me, it wouldn't be on a piece of paper. That is something I've been getting a lot of concern about recently, and that's, I just wanted a little definition. Why is it this can be, it's an oxymoron, verbal warning, written notation. You might as well just take out verbal warning.
Because it's the first step in progressive discipline that was negotiated 100 years ago.
I think
then
you're
we
Now,
just,
hold
you're
on.
just concerned about the language.
Yes,
You think
it's the
Okay, if
language.
you want to call it something else, I mean, we can just say a written warning and take out A and just have B.
No, it should be a verbal warning between the
But a
supervisor.
verbal, the reason why there's a written notation is because it has to be documented in
Why does it
some
have to be
fashion.
documented?
Because when the union files a grievance and says you jumped steps, that you went right to a written warning, you didn't give them a verbal warning, there is no documentation. That is a legal requirement. And, you know, in my previous life as a lawyer for the district, if it's not documented, it didn't happen. So if I
Are you
said
worried about the
verbally to
confusion
you,
with the
That's the
language?
confusion, and also if it's documented, it's not done, but it is documented, where if you have your own documentation as a supervisor, experienced supervisors should have that, and that is able to be brought into department hearings, which I had to do.
no, and I understand that, and that's assuming, that is assuming that the officer's going to say, hey, Kevin wrote this down, it never happened. Because that's what we have occurring, is the supervisor gives them a verbal directive, the employee goes in, no, you didn't, never happened. Never happened. And guess what? It didn't happen. Because as we have coached our supervisors all over the district, and I went back when I did training 20 years ago, the answer is a short pencil is better than a long memory. Because the pencil, writing it down, has a documentation to it. The employees handed it to them. There's witnesses, or they signed that they received it. It happened. And so if you want to call it something else, it doesn't mean that the officer supervisor can't do something before they get to progressive discipline. And that's what I was trying to explain to you, is that across this district, all over the place, that we may have an employee who does something and go, hey, don't do that. Don't do it that way. You don't discipline them the first time they did it because they didn't know better, right? So, and I go back to teachers because it's just easier for me to equate to that. A teacher who has a brand-new principal, doesn't turn their lesson plans in on Monday, doesn't realize that this principal wants it on the Friday before. The principal's not going to write them up the first time they don't turn in their lesson plans on Friday. They're going to talk to them and go, hey, you know, I just want to give you this note here. We talked about this in a staff meeting. You know, do you remember the staff meeting? Oh, yeah, I forgot. Okay, don't worry about it. The next time they do it, my principal still will do a conference note. They could go right to verbal reprimand, but they go to a conference note and they put it in writing to the employee, directing them to turn their lesson plans in on Monday. It's still not discipline. We still haven't even gotten to discipline yet.
And we can suggest changes in the language.
If you want to change it, call it something else, we can, because I looked at it, and to me, a verbal warning with written notation is the same thing as a written warning. There's no difference between the two of them.
Correct.
So we can even add language in here that verbal coaching is suggested. I wouldn't say always warranted that they should do that first, because there are some things you know as an employee that you shouldn't do. You know, I go back to the George Costanza from Seinfeld. He's, you know, I'm not supposed to sleep under my desk. Well, nobody ever told me I'm not supposed to sleep under my desk, you know? So it's something that everybody knows that you're not supposed to, you know, take a nap for half the day. We shouldn't have to give somebody a written documentation to show that. So we could add language in there that verbal coaching is appropriate, but it's not, I don't want to put it in progressive discipline because it shouldn't be. Just like you said, it's not discipline. That's not discipline, and it shouldn't be.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification.
Okay. So going in, we did add Article 30. This was something you asked for. This is the after-school childcare. We're already doing that. The employees, all employees get that 25% discount. They get priority placement and aftercare. The thing we did not add that they could assign students to their own school. And we had a long discussion about that, and here's the reason. We don't want to put the officer in a position that if there's an active shooter situation at their school, that they have to ignore their own child. And we don't want to put them in that situation because I can't even fathom that. No matter how well-trained you are as a parent, your first priority is your own kid. And so that's why we decided we really shouldn't be doing that. I know there are some officers who do work at the schools with their children, but we don't want to encourage it. If it happens, but we don't want to encourage it because we think that it puts safety at risk. And it puts the officers in just an untenable situation should something bad happen. For Article 31,
Just to clarify, too,
Sure.
that a teacher wouldn't have that same kind of feeling?
yeah, but the teacher is a different, they have a different
If I
role.
was a teacher in a school, regardless, I'm going to be going to where I'm going to be worrying about
You
my
are, but the teacher's responsibility is to hide, right? Your responsibility is to go towards the danger. And I don't want an officer
I'm
to,
not disagreeing with you on that.
Okay.
I'm just throwing that out
Yeah,
there
it's
to
a
clarify, because I know there's some of our members that still would like to be able to have their kids in the, school also.
and I appreciate that. I totally understand it. It's just for safety in the current environment we're living in. The job that you do in those situations, I think it puts the officers at risk. It puts the other people at risk. I think it could be a distraction. I mean, let's just go worst case scenario, and it just sickens me to even think about it. The officer walks in and their child is the one that's dead on the floor. Are they going to actually be able to do their work at that point? I don't know. I wouldn't be able to.
Do we know how many officers work at schools right now where their children go? Does anyone have
I
an
don't
idea?
think it's something we track.
It's not something we track. We'd have to we'd have to go officer by officer at the school and determine, do they have kids? Do they live in the boundaries? Do their children get into a choice program? I mean, I don't know that we would be able to track
Do you all
that.
know offhand? No.
I recently just had somebody inquire about it. So that's what brought it to my mind.
And you know profession-wide that many agencies don't allow family members to work together in same units and in the same vehicles and in the same precincts. And that's for the same reason.
Right.
It creates unsafe conditions for everyone involved when you're distracted during an emergency. And that's all we're trying to avoid.
So Article 31 would be Article 31 now, the duration of the agreement. We went back to the original language. We added that zipper clause there at the end. I think you may have proposed that, or maybe we did, but it's just basically the standard zipper clause that all the language, all the provisions that constitutes the full and complete understanding of the agreement. We changed the dates to reflect what they should be for a new successor agreement. And then the last is Appendix A. It is the minimum hourly rate, the maximum hourly rate. So there were some items that you wanted in the contract that we had priced out, but one of them that you had a provision about is work comp. I sent it over to our risk management director, and the answer was no. The law is pretty clear in work comp right now of what, the standards are, what the provisions are for you, and we're not interested in having that in the contract when there are specific laws on the case.
Where is that? What line on the spreadsheet?
That one's not on the spreadsheet, that's why I brought it up to you, because it's not a cost provision. There was a no from our Director of Risk and Benefits that handles our work comp. That the language you
About
provided. Excuse me?
What specific proposal are you referencing?
You had a proposal in yours, I can pull it up, you had a specific article that you added at the back for work comp, I think it was 34, 4, no, let me see. You had added extra articles, hold on.
Is it just a no to the whole workers' comp article?
Yes, a no to the whole workers' comp article. It was a new Article 31 you had added that basically kind of reiterated what's in 440, plus giving extra rights that aren't in 440, and our risk management team said that we couldn't do that.
Well, I don't know if you wanted to talk about 18 or 31, but for workers' comp, I was going to actually bring up for, I think there's a clause in the leave article, but if you're maliciously or intentionally
Correct.
injured.
It has to be malicious or intentional.
Right, it shouldn't be limited to 10 days. And I think that's in the statute, so I can send that to you.
If you can send that to me, then we can talk about that, and I'll hand that over to our risk management that does work comp. And we have gone about 15 minutes over our time for today. We can certainly set up another,
I'll talk with them, and I'll talk with the members, and I'll get back with you on the TAs.
We already
'cause-
set one up already?
Yes, we did, 2 weeks from today.
no, it was originally from 9 to 10. We had to move it back because Ms. Marsh and I have a meeting at 10 o'clock that we couldn't move. It's a statewide meeting.
Okay, yes, because we only want a
did still
TA, I
say
think,
8:30
if
to
the
10,
whole
by the way.
article is
did?
completed, so.
It should have been moved from 8:30 to 9:30 because,
It did say till 10, but that's fine. We'll
Okay.
talk about everything, and we'll get back with you on the
I
TAs.
want my 15 minutes.
well, Alex, you could sit here for 15 minutes. We'll record it, and you talk to the camera. I mean, I feel like I know there's still some sticking points. I feel like we've made tremendous movement on some of the issues that we felt were more of the sticking points for you. Like with the sergeants, we've made tremendous movement, not just completely gutting the whole thing, but creating what we felt was more in line with a special duty assignment, and it's not a promotion, so.
We still feel like, though, I'm going to talk for everybody here, that we're getting it taken away from us, but no other unit's getting things taken from them to give up like we are. You're looking to take things from us and take money out of our pocket, even though we had this discussion that it wasn't. We feel like that's exactly, we're helping the department. come
Well,
up
with most
5%.
of our other units, we settled on salary only.
Okay.
That was what we did. It was 3.5, we were done, out the door. This unit had said no to that, so that's why we're negotiating the whole book, and we'll continue to negotiate the whole book and talk it through. If we don't want to, as Mr. Sullivan said, we're just going to end up taking the 3.5. We wanted to give thoughtful consideration to what we feel would be best for the department and listen to what you had to say.
But nothing in here is for the best of the
Nothing
department,
for the
so
better
that's what I'm
for our
saying. I
members.
mean, nothing has been, is even remotely, I mean, we've given and given and given and gotten nothing.
I think
Well,
the
we have a
salary
different
is one
perspective.
thing, but we're just concerned about the extra, sergeant criteria, career ladder, all of that. Those changes are concerning to the reps and to the membership, so.
Yeah, exactly, and it should be concerning to the administration, because guess what? Our guys see this stuff, I mean, we see what's going around the country, we all know, we're not blind to it. People are leaving this field of work. And what makes you think that we're gonna be able to hire people into these positions when they can go somewhere else, where West Palm Beach is offering a $10,000 hiring bonus, where you got the PBSO that's looking to start you out at $70,000. If you want to get somebody into these positions, we have nothing to offer them. And what little we do, we're taking away.
Well, we feel that we do have a lot to offer as a school district. It's a very different,
Well,
it's a
we're gonna
very
find out even
different,
better during the summer, because when you see how many people are walking out the door,
You're not
that's
gonna have
it's a
enough
very
people.
different job than working for PBSO.
Ma'am, absolutely. But you know what? Our job has changed quite a bit now.
Correct.
Okay, we are not just street officers anymore. We are guidance counselors. We are mental health people. We are police officers. We are mentors.
Social workers.
Social workers. We have so much more on our plate that we have to deal with on a daily basis than they did 20 years ago. This isn't what it was 20 years ago.
It wasn't,
I have
it's
a-
not the same since 2007.
I have a question. This might be for Mike. Does the department plan on hiring outside agencies next year to work our schools? And if so, how much are they going to be paid per hour?
It's a possibility. I'm not sure. Right now, there's no contracts in place. We did have contracts in place, the last couple of years in case we needed help with coverage. I've heard that we might try to get those contracts back in place just as a backup in case it's needed. And then the pay, we had to pay basically the median, we paid an overtime rate.
Overtime rate.
It was an
You're paying,
overtime rate. It
what,
varied
close
by
to $80 an hour?
It varied from city to city based on their.
And they also have administrative fees, so the overtime rate plus the administrative fee on top of that, which is what we should be doing on ours.
So we don't have
That's
money to
another-
give,
yeah.
we don't have money for our contract to help our officers that are here now, but we have money to pay other officers in other departments $100 an hour.
I think that's an unfair,
well,
that's an
actually,
unfair characterization.
When we paid for it in the past, we used the money from vacant positions we couldn't fill, and it worked out all right. Because by the time you consider benefits and FRS and all that, we were okay. We stayed within budget.
And it's an unfair characterization. We were required by law to have an officer at every school. If we didn't have an officer, we have to have one.
Well, if we paid our officers better and we treated them better, we would have them.
That's an assumption, though I don't know to be true. We've had the same discussion.
I know it to be true. I've been
We've
here
had
long
this-
enough.
And I can tell you, I've had the same conversation about speech-language pathologists and the deaf and hard of hearing interpreters. We have serious contract work for them as well, and they say, okay, we raise our rate. We raised the rate for deaf and hard of hearing interpreters. It didn't change anything. So I understand what you're saying, and it makes sense on the face, but it hasn't occurred in other units. So necessarily paying more does not equate to getting more people in the door.
But a lot
Not
of
all the time.
A lot of the officers that we have that are leaving for better paying jobs. In the same line of work. They're leaving school police, they're going to the sheriff's department, they're going to Boca, they're going to all these other departments because they pay better and they
They're
have better
also
benefits.
working a lot more hours a day, per day,
They
and they're
have
doing
better-
very different work than what you do.
That's an assumption.
They're working
You're
less.
guessing now.
Benefits and vacation time.
I'm giving you a fact and you're giving me an assumption, because you don't know exactly what they're going for. You don't know what they work
We
for.
do exit surveys, Mr. Lopez.
So if you did, then did you do them in March when we had a couple of guys who retired and paid back $3,000 so they can get the heck out of here? They're so disappointed in it, instead of waiting around to June and 3 months. I said, guy, if you hang 3 months, you don't owe him anything. He says, I can't take this anymore. I've never seen that in the 14 years I've been here. People retiring to get out of here.
Right, but what you're telling me, it's not the money. You just told me it's not the money. It's other things, and we do
Oh, but we
exit
have
surveys.
young
Mr.
officers
Burke
that
has
are
something to
leaving. We have
say.
we had a retired sergeant in NYPD just quit. He's making money elsewhere. Someone just sent me as I'm sitting here. Coconut Creek, $10,000 signing bonus, $60,650 starting salary, 78
Right, but
midpoint,
but-
96,000 at max. You tell me money
Officer
doesn't matter?
O'Sullivan, we have told you multiple times, we are not able to raise the money to do that.
We
The
understand that,
state
but you're
gives us
taking
money.
away from us now, though. On top of that, so not only can't you compete with them, but you're taking stuff from us. That's where we're getting at. That's all we're getting at.
I understand, you've made that point abundantly clear, I don't necessarily agree with it.
Maybe we need to get a
Mr.
better
Burke, did you have
lobbyist or
something to
from
add?
Tallahassee. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I think the conversation moved on. I was just going to go back to the municipal officers and just say, our first preference is always to use our own, fill our own positions, use our own officers. That is there as a backup, just because the stakes are so high with the laws that are in place. You know, we have to have an officer at every school, regardless. So that's just, having those contracts is just kind of a safety blanket to make sure we fulfill our statutory responsibilities.
Well, we look forward to meeting with you, I think it's in 2 weeks, and Katie, maybe we get together, if you don't think that we're going to get anywhere in 2 weeks, we set some more dates.
Okay, yeah, and I'll follow up with you on all those other issues we discussed.
Okay, thank you, and you guys have a great afternoon.
Thank you.